This is Canon Fodder, episode 48, live from New York, Sicily. We'll figure that out in a moment. With me is my good friend Nikolas. Sir, how are you doing tonight?
TR, pleasure and a privilege to rejoin you on Canon Fodder.
So, I read The Godfather for the first time maybe 1 or 2 years ago, and then actually it was based on my recommendation, if I'm correct, that you picked it up. Yes?
That's right. Yeah, we were wrapping up a Gentleman in Moscow pod and just kind of shooting the shit afterwards. And Godfather's number 2 on my all-time movie list right after Tombstone. And I had mentioned how Godfather had played an inspiration in the novel I'm working on. And you asked if I had read it. I said no. And you strongly recommended it. So I immediately did that, and glad I did.
Yes, and of course, no discussion of this book is going to be able to get out from under the shadow of the films, especially the first one, given that Mario Puzo himself wrote the script for 1 and 2. There's no way to get around it. It's probably the greatest film ever made, and certainly the greatest adaptation of a novel for film ever done. So yeah, before we kind of get into the book itself, what were your thoughts?
The comment about the movie is interesting. I thought that the book and the movie complemented each other really well. I didn't realize Puzo had written the script as well for the movie. I should have known that, but
yeah, there's a Paramount Plus exclusive TV show that I watched about the making of The Godfather. It's called The Offer, yes, and it goes through all of that, and not a bad series, honestly. The guy that they got to play Puzo looks just like him. The guy that they got to play Coppola looks just like him as well.
That's fitting because the movie itself is it's almost a perfect interpretation of the book. There's more in the book, and I mean that in more ways than one. Like there's more scenes, there's more characters that you follow. But also, so not only the breadth of what you get in the book, but the depth, like getting under the skin of the characters. There's a lot of psychological kind of just stuff that's going on in the book that you can only kind of pick up on a superficial level in the movie. But that's why they complement each other so well, because there's some things in the movie that you just like the book. When I'm reading dialogue, I kind of just read it, and I don't really feel the emotional impact like I do when I'm watching a movie. So in that sense, like the one scene that jumps out is when they're at Luigi's, the restaurant, and the sound of the train is slowly building in the background as you're watching Michael, come to his destiny, and the tension that you feel as a viewer I just can't really pick that up in the book. With things like that and with things like dialogue. So the movie does its own thing really well. In the book, like I said, you get deeper into their skin. Sometimes you get more characters. So, but as I was reading the book, I was thinking to myself, it's almost like some of these actors are reading straight from the book. Like in the book, Puzo will narrate something like consigliere Tom Hagen, like he makes some kind of wry smile in the book because he's reflecting on some memory that he had. And I can see it clearly on the screen. Like he has the wry smile as if he's thinking about something from the past, like it's like all these characters are so true to what you get in the book, that it was kind of stunning to me how closely everything lined up. I really appreciated it, but,
and it's interesting, the things that are changed. And I think maybe we'll focus on that, on those aspects for the next little bit here, because I feel like everybody and their mother has seen The Godfather. It's certainly one of the most popular movies ever. And as you said, it's almost shot for shot with the novel. In fact, there are even some outtakes where, you know, like extra stuff that they just couldn't fit because this is a 3-hour movie that they ended up making.
Yeah.
And it's again shot for shot with scenes from the film. I'm thinking specifically of Michael comes back from the Marines. He's visiting his father. This is before the wedding. He's in his uniform, and Vito says something like pretty bits of women, or pretty bits of ribbon. Look at what you do for strangers, something like that. Like some dismissive comment about how much the Don really did not approve of his son going off and fighting in the war when his duty was to be with the family at that time.
That was the first thing that jumped out to me in the book, that specific scene that you just referenced. As when I talk about, you get more depth in the book. You know, if you liked the movie, you should absolutely read the book because you get some of this stuff. So, you know, so Don Corleone, he had no desire or intention of letting his youngest son be killed in the service of a power that was foreign to himself, you know? So like a friend shows Vito this magazine, because Michael was a little bit of a celebrity. Like what was he, a purple ribbon or something?
No, I think he got the Medal of Honor, actually.
Yeah. And so like he gets this like magazine cover, I think. And so a friend shows that magazine to Don Corleone, and Don is actually, you can just sense he's actually a little bit resentful. He says he performs these miracles for strangers.
Right.
And that really sets the tone for like the overall, one of the important themes of family and friendship being more important than anything, and not respecting these other institutions.
And I think it's right before that happens is the scene with the old consigliere, Antonucci.
I've got it.
Antonio Antonucci, I think it is.
Let me see. I've got Abbinando.
That's right.
And that was a great scene in the book that's not in the movie.
He is dying of cancer, and the Godfather comes, and he automatically, you would think that the man was talking to God himself.
Well, I wanted to talk about exactly what you said earlier, because this feeling that Don Vito Corleone is a stand-in for God himself is present all the way throughout the book. Just the way that people revere him, they look to him as a provider, a protector. He's got great fortune. He never loses. He's like the presence of the divine for his family, for his tribe. And yeah, it stands out the most, I think, in that specific scene with the dying consigliere. You know, he says, "Save me from death. You know, cure me. You have the power." And yeah, he looks to him like a god, and really deep, powerful. Yeah, you don't get it in the movie, but you get the sense for just the power, the importance that that the Godfather has for everyone in his little nation.
There's also a lot of there are two subplots of the novel that don't show up in the film, probably, and I understand why, but one of them I think adds a lot of depth to the story, that being the Johnny Fontaine story.
Right? Yeah.
And then the other is the the poorly endowed bridesmaid
Yeah.
who moves to Las Vegas because I'm going to try and keep this safe for work. If you know, you know. So I'm going to.
Well, she's not poorly endowed. She's a little over endowed, actually.
Well, and I mean poorly endowed in that it's so. She has a wide, cavernous,
personality.
Birth canal.
Oh, okay.
Say.
Yeah.
And there's not an insignificant amount of ink spilled to describe this, as well as why she was perfect for Sonny Corleone, the eldest son, because like Shel Silverstein's The Missing Piece, he fit just right.
Yes. Yeah. I thought the novel was going to go in a different direction. Yeah. Right early on, they really hit you over the head with that. And I was worried about what the tone of the novel was going to be like. But in any event, Johnny Fontaine and The Bridesmaid, they're both examples of
her name is Lucy or something, right? Lucy.
I don't even remember her name. Luce. She's loose in any event. But her and Johnny are examples of when you enter into the family circle, what the Godfather and what his family will do for you.
But also what is expected of you.
Yeah.
Nothing is, you learn right away that nothing is free in this world. Not even Michael, who is the Don's most beloved son, the one who takes after the Don the most, the one who's trying to get out of this life. Not even, and he tries to get out. He tries to be legitimate. That he tries to take freely from the Don, whether it's getting into college, whether it's leaving the family to go serve in the military during the war, because it's something that he wants to do, and we'll get into the whys around that in a little bit. But the first thing that we really learn about Michael is that he is trying to, much like the prodigal son in the Bible, right? He is trying to take his inheritance, and he is trying to exfiltrate himself from his responsibilities, his duties to his family. The prodigal son, obviously a very different parable, where he squanders his gifts, or not his gifts, his inheritance, and then is brought back into the fold. All is forgiven. Whereas with the Godfather, Michael does not squander his inheritance. He does his best to make something of himself, and later he has to commit the gravest sin of all, murder, in order to pay back what he has taken from the Don.
It's his repentance,
right? Yeah. Really. So maybe the Godfather is not. He's an inversion of God, we can say. Not a stand-in for God himself, but rather an inversion, not so much Satan, but almost an anti-God, if that makes sense. Maybe Satan. I don't know.
I think I disagree. It depends on how you interpret the theme of the novel, and obviously, the Corleones are not good people. It's almost like Judge Holden in Blood Meridian, where the Godfather and the judge, they both represent some higher power. And of course it's not benevolent in the way we would typically think of it. And I think, this analogy breaks down pretty quickly, because the judge is pretty damn malevolent, but for his people, for his nation, tribe, family, neighborhood, whatever you want to call it, even murder is done in service of their people. They are taking great personal risk of violent death themselves in order to sort of be heroes for their people, to provide. And can good people do bad things? Is murder ever justified? And if so, in what contexts? I could see your perspective as, certainly not a one-to-one, like, he's meant to be God, but he's certainly presented Vito early on, I think, as as a divine force anyways, and maybe not, you know, the monotheistic God of Christianity, but, yeah, the analogy of the prodigal son is a really good one. I hadn't thought about that at all, but as soon as you said it, that clicked for me. I bet that Puzo probably had that in his head as he was writing Michael, because it is a story of, yeah, the father's not happy, the son goes away, and even though the son appears to be doing things that we consider noble, from the perspective of the family and from the Godfather, you know, the protagonist of the book, I guess you could consider Michael the protagonist, but you know, from Vito's perspective, it's, you know, Michael's not doing a good thing, and so I really like that the prodigal son perspective. But there's another there you know, there's a few lines when they just talk about what that makes me think of this. Godfather is the divine leader, like obviously Abinando we talked about. Luca, you know, the meat, the muscle, the
unforgiven Luca Brazzi, who is he only fears Don Corleone. He is the enforcer, the strong man, the problem solver, the almost like the angel of death himself.
Yeah, and there's a line where they say the Godfather was the only thing that Luca believed in, the only man he feared. To me, that was almost like there's sort of like a spiritual aspect there in the relationship between Vito and Luca. And then Michael even just comes out and says it. I've got a quote written down here from the book. For the second time, Hagen saw Michael Corleone's face freeze into a mask that resembled uncannily the Don's. And Michael says, "Tom, don't let anybody fool you. It's all personal. Every bit of business, every bit of shit every man has to take every day of his life is personal. They call it business, okay, but it's personal as hell. And you know where I learned that from? The Don, my old man, the Godfather. It's a bolt of lightning. I'm sorry, if a bolt of lightning hit a friend of his, the old man would take it personal. He took my going to the Marines personal. That's what makes him great. He takes everything personal, like God. He knows every feather that falls from the tail of a sparrow, or however the hell it goes. And you know something? Accidents don't happen to people who take accidents as a personal insult." So that was, again, like just, you know, right from Michael's mouth, saying that Vito is like God. And again, just the way that he's always described, it's like he's omnipotent. He performs miracles. He's almost more like maybe like a pagan god, like the Norse, like a All-Father, you know, like an anthropomorphized spirit. Like he never lets his friends down. You don't want to make him angry. You want to show respect. You want to offer gifts like sacrifices to be in his good graces, and you're always rewarded when you do that. He's got tremendous luck, and he's just regarded like a mythical figure right from the beginning. And you know, he calls people to purification and repentance, like Johnny Fontaine. He slaps him straight and says, you know, maybe, what does he say? Like you
gotta act like a man.
Yeah, act like a man. You can learn about the world from your Godfather. But you have to give up drinking and women. Like you have to stop this sinning, and then I'm going to take care of you. So it just, all those little things add up. And again, whether I'm not saying he's God, but maybe the pagan, like All-Father's a closer approximation. And the pagans were known to do some nasty things. Maybe
a sort of Roman, he's Jupiter, let's say.
Sure. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. So, but,
there's also the theme of immigrants in America trying to make it in America. I did a podcast with Isaac Simpson of the Carousel on Philip Roth's American Pastoral, which deals with a very similar theme, right? You have the Jewish American Swede Lvov, who is trying to become a WASP, right? He marries a WASP girl. He tries to raise his daughter in this small town in New Jersey. He's like 6'4", blonde hair, blue eyes, looks like he's chiseled out of marble. He joins the military. He was the best athlete in his high school. Everybody loved this guy, right? And he tried very hard to be quote unquote American, and that ends up being his own downfall. Is his desire to become American. We see throughout The Godfather, all attempts at Americanization are either stifled or end up getting people killed. Right? The very first character that we're introduced to, Amerigo Bonacera. Americo Vespucci.
Bonacera.
Yes, Bonacera. So that his name is literally America Goodnight.
Yeah.
Right. And he is, this isn't his first line. This is the first line in the film, right?
Yeah.
I believe in America, right? We don't get to that until like something like 25 pages in to the novel itself, but we're opened up to a few character introductions before Connie's wedding. You see Bonacera deciding right then and there he can no longer use the American justice system. He has to go to his enclave. He has to go to his people in order to avenge his daughter's honor. Right. Meanwhile, you've got Johnny Fontaine who comes to much the same conclusion. Right. He wants to be in a film. He wants to. He can't sing the way he used to. Right. You've got Enzo, the Italian baker, who knows. And it's funny. Enzo wants to be an American, right? Because he wants to marry a woman that he fell in love with here in the States. But he is steeped in the old country. He knows exactly who and what he has to do in order to stay in this country. He knows he has to go to Don Corleone, who's going to be his godfather, his benefactor, right? So it's interesting that you have the guys who have been here for a while try and work within the systems that exist. Meanwhile, the guy who's right off the boat, he's like, oh, I know, I just go right to Don Corleone, you know?
The scene with Bonacera, there was one of the, I like to take notes when I read, or like, just copy the quotes over. And it was probably the first one that I wrote down, because it almost speaks a little bit to some sentiment that some people are probably feeling today. Vito tells Bonacera, you found America a paradise. You had a good trade. You made a living. You thought the world was a harmless place. You could take your pleasure as you willed, but you never armed yourself with true friends. The police guarded you. There were courts of law. You wouldn't come to harm, and you didn't need Don Corleone. Well, here you are now. And, so the police and the judges obviously don't give Bonacera justice. So he asks, I'm lost, now I'm coming to you. And, Vito certainly represents this older way. And Michael is from the beginning, his will is trying to go to this new way as well. And you make a good point that early on, a lot of these people who are trying the new way aren't really having much luck. The Godfather's way is more successful. People come to him, he provides. But, you mentioned everybody who tries to do things the new way kind of doesn't have any luck. They don't have luck. And I think you're right to an extent, but at the same time, part of the theme I felt reading this from front to back is the Corleones trying to transition to become legitimate, and Michael's will starting over time to override Vito's will of doing it the old way. In the end, Vito, even for one reason or another, he bends to Michael's will. He's on the way out. He knows that Michael's, the future. And Michael's plan all along is, look, our family's going to be legitimate. In 10 years, we've got to make a couple of really big moves here. And once we do this, we're going to be set up. We're going to be legitimate. We're going to be in Las Vegas. We don't need to do these things the old way anymore. And it's sort of, yeah, how can these immigrants with their old ways, how can they use their old ways to transition to the new ways, I guess? And obviously, by the end, Michael hasn't at the end of this novel gotten to the new way yet. And I know that there's more movies where he tries to still be legitimate, but
well, and it's interesting too, because Michael's entire path, he has children with Kay, right? First of all, he marries and dates a Connecticut Yankee, right?
Yeah, she's part of the
WASP establishment that he so desperately wants to be part of.
A perfect character to represent what Michael wants to make his family into.
And he demands that his children are raised the quote unquote Yankee way.
Yeah.
And there's actually a really cool scene in the book. The police are looking for Michael, and they go to Kay's house, and even her father knows somewhat, like, you keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting. It's a very interesting sort of unspoken, like a Yankee omerta kind of thing.
Yeah, and I couldn't get the sense if that was because Kay's father knows, maybe he fears the Corleones and he doesn't want to get in trouble with them, or if it's more, hey, back in these days, the wife, you give your wife to her husband, and hey, you do right by your husband, you follow his will. And
well, they're not married yet. I think they were this is like right after Michael kills the police captain.
That's true. Yeah. So that probably,
it's probably more either it is fear, or it is a sort of, because it's left ambiguous, but it could be a sort of understanding that even these, the system as it exists may not even exist for them.
Yeah.
It may exist for nobody. That even the WASP American Yankees have their own extrajudicial sort of power structures that they can go to if they need things to be done.
Yeah. And I was thinking about it probably in analog to the daughters, Connie and her husband, Rocky or Rocco.
No, her husband is Carlo.
Carlo, sorry. Yeah, Rocco's another. Yeah,
Rocco. Rocco's
Connie and
great.
Carlo are sitting at the dinner table, and Mama Corleone's right there, and it's kind of evident that Carlo smacks Connie around a little bit, but even Mama Corleone's like, well, you should behave better. You should make your husband happy, and he won't slap you. And so I was thinking about that with the scene with Kay, like if it was almost just like a general, like, patriarchy hadn't yet gone away in the United States, and it was, but you're right, they weren't, Connie and Michael had not yet married Kay, so that it probably wasn't fully that. There was probably another angle here. Just a general sense of women should be under the man's thumb, kind of littered throughout the novel. I didn't think too much more of it.
Right. I mean, we're also talking about. Even today, you have Italians who follow this the more patriarchal, more machismo way. Even though, from experience, Italian women, especially Italian American women, are loud and annoying.
Oh man. No comment on that one. I know some Italian American women who are close to me, but in any event, I wanted to ask you, so, we talk about this struggle of for immigrants trying to Americanize despite maybe being wrapped up in crime. And I wondered, so you said you had read this 2 years ago. So I'm trying to remember when you published The Perfect and the Wicked, which is pretty much, I don't want to call it an Irish Godfather, but there's a lot of similar themes, I think.
I published Perfect and the Wicked about a year ago, maybe a year and some change. It's hard to remember at this point, but yeah, I definitely took a lot from The Godfather.
Okay.
In terms of in terms of the structuring. See, from a historical standpoint as well, it's easier for the Irish to integrate into WASP society, right? Joseph P. Kennedy himself is a prime example of that. He came from a political family. He was able to get deeply entrenched in Democrat politics and got two, almost three, almost four actually of his sons set up to be very high-ranking members of the American elite.
Right? Yeah, but he was involved in crime himself early on, right?
Yes, he was. All of the biographies of him say that was not so. That was just made up.
But it's this struggle. It's this struggle for criminal immigrants to try to they want to become great, but they also want to be legitimate. They want to do it the American way, and it's a struggle of how do you evolve from one, whether it's like a criminal syndicate or a mafia, whatever when you want to call it, and graduate into another mafia, which is American politics. You just got to kind of change the nature of the crime.
Well, and it's interesting too, because if we look at the crop of quote unquote new Americans that are coming here, there is no attempt at Americanization. There's no attempt at
integration or
assimilation. Yes. Because that's also not being enforced from the top down.
Right.
So these criminal elements, right? Because I mean, I'm not going to paint with a broad brush and say that every single one of them are criminals. I mean, yes, because they cross the border illegally, they are, but
just these famous ones.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Today you're talking about.
Yes, I'm talking about today. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about.
Some are very fine people, I'm sure.
Yes, I assume. But the ones that come here specifically to do crime in order to enrich themselves do not have this tension of Americanization. In fact, America is this economic zone for which they can use it to enrich themselves by any means necessary.
Yeah, it's not American anymore. It's truly cosmopolitan, where it used to be American.
Right. That's kind of neither here nor there. It's something that I've been thinking a lot about recently.
I mean, it's kind of here. Yeah, it's definitely relevant right now. Maybe we'll have a Haitian president in 20 years.
Barbecue, President Barbecue.
Yeah. So.
I think he's a very bad man, right? Well, not a bad man. He's a complete coward, Bonacera, but I think he's my favorite character, and I'm glad that the novel really delves deep into who he is and how he thinks.
Yeah.
There's later on when the War of the Five Families is going on and Sonny is killed and the Godfather calls on Bonacera, all he can think about is I wish I never asked anything of the Godfather. Now I'm liable to be attacked by his enemies because I am friends with him. Like this sort of just spinelessness to him. He got exactly what he wanted. He got revenge for his daughter, but he feels no sense of honor to keep up his end of the deal. In fact, Bonacera is probably the most Americanized of the characters in the book because he originally wishes to pay for the services of Don Corleone, thus owing him nothing afterwards.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, just pay him off. Vito really needs to drag Bonacera through this ritual. I mentioned earlier you need to offer up some sort of sacrifice or like a tithe and maybe do some repentance, and the All-Father will bestow blessings upon you. And Bonacera really doesn't want to do it. That's a good point. And he goes through it, and it's just kind of the first chapter of the book, and you think, okay, maybe he's having a change of heart. But then, no, you're right. When you revisit Bonacera later on, it's clear he was just trying to go through the motions to get his and get out of there. So an interesting character for sure. Definitely. I mean, he's called Amerigo, I'm sure, intentionally for that purpose.
Towards the end of the book, in my copy, it's page 411. We don't see this happen in the film. When Michael takes his not his revenge, when Michael closes all family business with the five families, right? There is a bit of revenge that Michael strikes in the book. The man who kills his first wife, or who sold him out, right? And planted the car bomb, and kills Apollonia, right? He's come to the United States. He's working in a pizzeria and in Buffalo, New York, right? And he thinks he's gotten away scot-free. This is years later, and I just want to read this one this one part of the book, right? Hold on, let me get the right part. I hear you got a great tattoo on your chest, the customer said. I can see the top of it over your shirt. How about letting me see the rest of it? The counterman froze. This is the guy. The counterman froze. He seemed to be paralyzed. Open your shirt, the customer said. The counterman shook his head. I got no tattoo, he said in a heavily accented English. That's the man who works at night. The customer laughed. It was an unpleasant laugh, harsh, strained. Come on, unbutton your shirt. Let me see. The counterman started backing toward the rear of the store, aiming the edge around the huge oven. But the customer raised his hand above the counter. There was a gun in it. He fired. The bullet caught the counterman in the chest and hurled him against the oven. The customer fired into his body again, and the counterman slumped to the floor. The customer came around the serving shelf, reached down and ripped the buttons off the shirt. The chest was covered with blood, but the tattoo was visible, the intertwined lovers and the knife transfixing them. The counterman raised one of his arms feebly as if to protect himself. The gunman said, Fabrizio, Michael Corleone sends his regards. He extended the gun so that it was only a few inches from the counterman's skull and pulled the trigger. He then walked out of the store. At the curb, a car was waiting for him, with its door open. He jumped in and the car sped off. The one thing that we don't get from the film that we get in abundance in the novel, just because, I mean, again, this is page 411 that this occurs. In the book's like 460 pages long. We don't see how much time passes in the film, and it's hard to do even in a long film like that, right? We get little allusions here, but we don't see the characters age so much. Not even the Don himself ages in the film like he does in the novel. But this book, we see how long these grudges are remembered. We see how long these plots for revenge take to actually unfurl.
I guess in the book, or I'm sorry, in the movie, I think you see Michael. Do you see Michael's kid grow up like a little bit to kind of give you a sense?
A little bit, yeah. He grows up. You know, you see that's when the Don dies. He's in the tomato garden with his grandson, and he just kind of falls over.
Yeah.
I
didn't. I guess I got lost in the passage of time as well. I didn't realize how much time truly had passed during that scene. My only thing that I was thinking about during that scene was how badass that was, and how you know, basically just a demonstration now that, you know, of Michael's power level, that he's able to pull this thread even from another continent. And however much time has passed, he's able to deliver that justice. Kind of like like a needle in a haystack, but he finds him anyways. He's sort of taken on whatever power that the previous Godfather had.
Right. Yeah. There's one scene, we don't get it so much in the film, where comes to truly appreciate the extent of the Godfather's legitimate and illegitimate network. Like as soon as Michael is being groomed for taking over the family, the Don shares all of the secrets, and Michael can only kind of stand in awe of his father and what he's actually built.
Yeah. You get a sense for it early on when, with the movie director Waltz, you're reading the book. If you're reading the book for the first time and you hadn't seen the movie, you're just thinking like, there's no way that the Godfather is going to be able to pull anything off over here. It seems like Waltz has a pretty good stranglehold on the power structure out there, but even from the other side, from one shining sea over to the other, he's able to put this horse's head in Waltz's bed early on. And yeah, it just examples over and over of the power level and the network that these guys have. It's that also kind of goes to my theory that it's just like he's omnipotent. Like that, it really probably wouldn't happen like in real life. I don't know how talented these mobsters were at being mobsters, but yeah, just a pretty impressive power level.
Yeah.
I
was gonna say the character of Alan Neary and his transformation into becoming Michael's Luca Brasi is interesting to watch as well, because we do Luca, you know, he less of a character here, more talked about than sort of us getting a glimpse inside of his psyche. Whereas Neary, we see the process of him becoming Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah, Michael grooming him. Yeah. You definitely don't get
and you get a little bit of that with Rocco Lampone too.
Yeah, but, you don't get it in the movie. It's just another character, another henchman that shows up. But that's what makes this novel so good is the depth, I guess breadth and depth, right? Like I'll probably keep saying that, but I don't know. It's written in third person. I don't want to say omniscient, but it's obviously multiple point of view characters, and Puzo, even like between paragraphs, he might switch from one person's point of view to another, and like he'll tell you what they're thinking, and then he'll go to the next paragraph and it's focused on someone else and it'll tell you what they're thinking. So like, you know, there's some novels where it's like third person limited, and you really don't know what's going on through other people's heads, but Puzo just writes everybody, whoever he wants, and he dives right in right away. And you know, there's pros and cons to that from like a narrative perspective. He pulled it off here well, but he doesn't leave things unsaid for very long. So like, for example, when Tessio turns out to be the traitor near the end, he pretty much just tells you right away that, hey, you know, whoever sets up this meeting with, gosh, I keep forgetting all these guys' names. The head of it's kind of like the new alpha of the 5 houses.
Not Don Tomasino. It's, hold on, I got my copy right here.
But in any event, it's,
I do want to talk about K only because I just happened to flip open to a page.
And yeah, like you get really deep into Kay's skin as well, and like all the horror that she starts to feel and the conflict that she has with, you know, I love Michael, but man, you know, do I really want to get into this? And everything that entails. So
Barzini, Don Barzini.
Barzini, yeah. So they tell you right away, all right, whoever sets up this meeting with Barzini is going to be the traitor. And then as soon as Tessio does it, then they start talking about, like, there's really little that Puzo leaves unsaid, except for the final, like the end game, the climax where he goes and assassinates all of them. He does build that one up pretty well with like dramatic tension. He keeps telling Clemenza and Tessio, look, guys, things are going to be okay. You just have to trust me. And you get the sense that they don't trust Michael. Like, hey, you're not the Godfather. Like, we wanted to have our own regimes, our own families. Are you going to let us go? And he's like, I promise you, once we're done, I'll let you have your own families. But like, they don't believe him. And Puzo does that really well.
They sidestep him right away. They're like, well, Godfather, you said this, and Don Corleone, to his credit, he's like, hey, Michael is head of the family now, and he makes these decisions. It's Puzo. We also have to think of the time in which it's sort of written, right? Mm-hmm. This is his first, well, not his first try at a novel, but it's his first big success. He had a couple of books that were pretty poorly received. This book was sexy enough, going into the mafia, that it could be a success. But the reason that the film is so successful is because you have a guy like Coppola who understands that not everything has to be said, that there can be, and it's also a an advantage that film has over literature in some respects, is that people are watching and can see people's reactions, the way that their faces, they kind of turn their faces and say one thing but mean another. That's a little bit more difficult to pull off in a book than watching a flesh and blood person actually say these things out loud.
A book that's written like this, where like I said, he gets into every character pretty much has like point of view narration.
I think Dune kind of suffers from this as well.
I agree. Yeah, that's a good call. I mentioned on the last pod that we were on that great writing is a number of things. You could have really good characters who are like conflicted and the reader feels empathy for them. You could have like a really well structured plot with good pacing, a surprising payoff that's well set up. You could just be really artful with your prose and string sentences and words together really well. You could have a good theme. So Puzo, he's not artful. His prose is good, but it's not like Melville or like Dostoevsky level literature, like prose. But I'm a sucker for character and plot and theme. And so I don't really care about the, I guess, sometimes lack of subtlety with the narration style in The Godfather. I do think it's a fair criticism. But the characters are great. The plot, and the themes, like I said, I'm a sucker for those things, and The Godfather delivers on those. I was going to ask you earlier, what edition you have, because mine, I got this from my father, and there's like tape on the binding, and the back says that this is soon to be a major motion picture from Paramount.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I got mine at like a Barnes and Noble a couple of years back. It's the 50th anniversary edition.
Okay.
With a forward and with an intro from Francis Ford Coppola himself, and
nice.
It's actually a pretty good intro. It's called "You Didn't Make Him, He Made You." Right? It's a few connected guys were talking to Coppola, and they were saying that Puzo made him, and that as a director, which I mean is kind of true. Coppola then goes on to have like one of the best runs of any director ever, but he was not unknown. He was relatively small before then, but it's interesting because Italians generally, but the mafia that of course doesn't exist, right? Hated this book, right? Joe Colombo, and if you watch that show, The Offer, again, which I recommend, it's a pretty good show. Joe Colombo, he ran the Italian American Defamation League, Anti-Defamation League, something like that.
There's an Italian ADL.
Pretty much at the time there was in the 60s and 70s there was.
God help us.
But Joe Colombo was talking about how American or Italian Americans were being discriminated against and being called gangsters all the time while running the Colombo crime family.
Yeah. Like I said, it's kind of like a relevant book for our own modern age as well. With all the immigration that's happening, and you hear people today say, "Oh, they said just the same things about the Italian and the Irish." And I think to myself, well, the Italians came over and I think crime went up.
They established, the Irish too. Hey, listen,
and they all voted for Democrats.
that is true. They voted Democrat. I wanted to talk. We're coming close to time, but I wanted to talk about the character of Kay in the book contra the film.
Okay,
because whether it was because of the women's liberation movement, whether it's because they needed to add more drama to Michael's life, in my opinion, they ruined Kay for the express purpose of giving Michael a challenge that he cannot overcome. So Kay, in the book, she becomes a dedicated mafia wife. She even converts to Catholicism, and at the end of the book, it's just her and Mama Corleone praying for the soul of Michael.
That's right.
As he's doing these horrible things. Meanwhile, Kay she understands everything that's going on, right? She kind of gets the score and the life that she's coming into. Meanwhile, in the film, she's so naive to what Michael does and what he has kind of brought her into, and then commits the ultimate sin, especially in an Italian Catholic family, of aborting her son so that he doesn't grow up in this world that Michael has set up for them. Again, it ruins her character in my eyes. I think she was a very well done sort of support system for this system, support system for a man who is to take over this family. But I understand why it was done from a narrative sense, because it's just so interesting that the most powerful criminal element in the country has to atone or has his own sort of struggles that he with his immense power cannot overcome. It's again that because he tries to become an American Yankee wasp, right? He doesn't marry an Italian girl, or he does, and then she does, because Apollonia, she probably would have made a terrific mobster's wife, right? But because he tries to Americanize, it leads to his own downfall.
Yeah. Did Puzo write a sequel to Godfather?
Yes, he did. So he wrote a book called The Sicilian, which is a direct sequel and sort of analogous to Godfather 2, right? He also wrote the script for Godfather 2.
Okay, well, yeah, so that's interesting. So Puzo himself kind of plays into maybe changing Kay in part 2. I don't know if in the second book, if Kay,
I haven't read it either
as well.
I would be surprised, but I haven't read it either.
the movie, it's not in Godfather. Godfather the novel charts very well to Godfather the movie, Godfather 1. There are scenes in the second Godfather movie that follow Vito Corleone when he's younger, and those line up perfectly in the book.
Yes.
So so Godfather novel gives you kind of some flavor.
Yeah, it was kind of unfair for me to bring that in, but
no, that's fine. But it's important. It's a good point. It's insightful. I didn't really even think of that in the movie, how they did kind of change her character, even though it's in the second movie. You know, in the book, Kay is very important to Michael. I don't want to say that she's a crutch, but he needs her because he's chasing this legitimacy. He wants to be, you know, Americanized. He wants the family to be legitimate. Kay sort of represents, she's like a personification of that, even though, like, to your point, he ends up turning her Italian, but he doesn't turn her Italian, but you know, he makes her into a mafia wife in the novel. And that is important for him in the novel. Whereas in the book, in the movie, they sort of turn her instead into like this extra conflict.
Yeah, this other obstacle.
It's like in Lord of the Rings movie, one of the main gripes that I had was when Sam and Frodo are climbing up the stairs of Cirith Ungol, and Frodo sends Sam back, and Sam actually does, and he goes down. And I was like screaming because I'm like, Sam would never do this. You're ruining his character. And obviously he comes back or whatever, but it's like why in the movies do you need to add extra drama at the expense of characterization? And it kind of bugs me. And yeah, they do that with Kay with this abortion, and she's kind of like more of a tension.
I don't want to say girl boss because that's not right.
Yeah, no, she's just a girl though. She's like, you know, shit testing, and she doesn't.
Yeah, she's not a kept woman. She is definitely her character changes post women's liberation, right? She is one of these sort of and again, that could just that it could be explained away as, well, that's Hollywood, you know, like that's we can't have a traditional relationship, a traditional relationship in a modern context where you have, you know, of course, Don Corleone's wife, she is a very traditional Italian woman, but that's okay because she's old. You know what I mean? Like, it's
sure. Yeah. No, that's a good insight on Kay. With the time we had left, I wanted to talk more about the theme. You know, we talked a lot about the differences between the book and the novel and whatnot, but this, I feel like the story is, I don't want to say like right wing. I don't know if that's correct, but there's a lot of themes that I think you could probably say they glorify virtues that we might glorify as appreciators of Western civilization. That's probably a better way to put it. So, for example,
well, it's a fine tightrope, right? I'd say, because on the one hand, we should have an established law and order. The reason that Western civilization the reason that we have a high trust society is because we had these institutions that were, at least on paper, neutral, right? It's not like, you know, it wasn't so tribal that, you know, you would go to your village elder and he would rule in your favor over some other guy because for only the express purpose that you're of us and he's not. You know what I mean?
Right.
There was a level of justice and fairness in the English system that was brought over to America that I think we would throw away at our own peril, right? Right now we do live in tribal times, right? And we need to start thinking tribally. right? So if you're a sensitive young man on the internet, you know that you're not going to get a fair shake from society. So it's better that you realize that and act accordingly.
What happens when the institutions stop becoming neutral? Yeah, and they touch on this just a little bit in the movie, but this is where the book adds so much more color that I really appreciated it, and I encourage everybody to read, because it talks about first the institution of the mafia in Sicily. The story goes, I think it was maybe post-war times, Sicily, maybe it was post-World War I. Sicily was just ravaged. Like, it was poor, destitute. The judges were corrupt. The cops were basically pimps. And so what happened was a bunch of guys on the island said, if we can't get justice from the law, we need to sort of form our own fellowship and institute our own justice. And they basically call that the mafia. So it comes through in this concept of omerta, which is the law of silence. But I don't interpret the law of silence to just mean strictly like, don't squeal. I think that's included in the concept of omerta, but it's a lot more than that. It's like this unspoken policy that we are going to handle things internally. If you have problems, we are your circle of trust. You can't trust those crooked cops and judges and institutions on Sicily anymore. So if a cop knocks on your door and asks, hey, did you happen to see, this crime that happened the other day? You have no obligation to them. They are not in your circle of trust. So it's not just, oh, I can't squeal because I'm afraid. It's, no, I just don't respect your authority. I have no reason to talk to you. Like, we're going to institute our own system of justice. And so that was the mafia in Sicily.
And we're not there yet.
No. And I pray to God we never will be. And I certainly don't encourage anybody to do anything like that ever. Right. Disavow. But it comes back again when you're following Vito, when he's a new immigrant in America. You have this Don Fanucci, who is the head of the mafia, on their neighborhood or their block or wherever, in New York. And he really operates more like a tyrant. He doesn't offer protection or service to his neighborhood. He just comes down, or he comes around and he shakes you down. And
it's funny because he uses the name the Black Hand, right? Oh. Like he is trading on a name that inspires fear rather than him inspiring fear and loyalty himself. And Don Corleone, Vito at the time, he's not the Don yet. He picks up on this right away, that this man is not sanctioned by the Black Hand, and therefore can be taken out with impunity.
Yeah. So Vito kind of speed runs his own, however the mafia formed in Sicily, he kind of follows the same playbook in New York. He realizes that the authority on my block is a tyrant. He's not going to give us justice. So we need to take justice into our own hands. And so he overthrows the tyrant, and he really becomes a king, like a monarch. Monarchy as it ever existed in Europe was basically, it was warriors or military men, and a king emerged as sort of the most noble among these nobles, the most elite of a warrior elite. And so, these warriors, they might take land for themselves and, organized hierarchically beneath their, alpha wolf. They establish a state, or, basically just a monopoly on violence over any given territory. And eventually these guys in Europe become kings. It's not so different from how the mafia is formed. And then you have a Don of a mafia is sort of the same as a king in his knights in Europe. And so Don Vito Corleone becomes that same. He becomes the king for his neighborhood in New York, where now he's not going around and shaking people down. Instead, he's offering protection. He's offering service. He can do miracles for you. It's kind of, again, this divine monarch character who, sometimes the only justice that you can get in the world is the justice that you make. And when the institutions who rule you become tyrants, well, rebellion against tyrants is obedience to God, sort of thing. And so that's that theme, and just the historical backdrop. I think there's maybe some monarchists in our space, and I see Don Corleone as a king. And the way that they bind their mafia together is just, one of the themes that I caught throughout the novel was this concept of masculine friendship. And there's countless quotes on friendship. You could Google the Godfather, Goodreads quotes on friendship or whatever, and you'd get a litany. But, everything everything comes down to friendship for Vito Corleone. Like, that's how you get in the circle of trust. And I think it's most well illustrated through Johnny Fontaine and his friend, I think it's Nico, where Vito tells Johnny Fontaine, when Johnny Fontaine comes and asks for all this help, he's like, well, have you been a good friend to Nico? Isn't he a good singer too? And Johnny's like, well, no, this and that. And Don basically says, look, you need to be a better friend. And if you start to do these things, then you're going to start to get good things in return. And again, like throughout the book, good examples of the Don and how he values friendship, but you really see like Johnny Fontaine's character start to flourish the more that he pulls Nico under his wing and starts to grow.
The more that he becomes more like Vito.
Yes.
The better he is. It's like he's on the Vito Corleone sort of Tony Robbins plan.
Yeah. By adopting these values, you're gonna bring more wealth and power into your own life, and really, Johnny Fontaine is saved in the end. It's a rocky path. There's a long subplot with his wife, his ex-wife. He has this whore of an actress that's a wife, and eventually he has to get rid of her, and he comes back to his old wife, and it's a redemption plot for Johnny Fontaine that's really rewarding. And again, the theme of masculine friendship is woven throughout. I felt like that was really important. That's something foundational to Western civilization as well. Again, whether it's like the Greeks or it's the kings and their knights in Europe, it's like a code that binds men to serve their nations. So I think this is, a nationalist book as well, where the nation is, Vito's his neighborhood, and then it's his family, and then it's his network. It's, anti-statist, basically. Like, we don't respect these outside institutions. We're going to establish our own little state for the benefit of our people. Blood and friendship ties everything together. That's what it's founded on. And you need a monarch at the top of like the war band to enable all those benefits. And again, I struggle to call it like right wing. I think it's just something that's like, you see this throughout Western history.
I would call it traditional.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's all kind of like values and themes that our guys would all really appreciate. And so he never really gets too much like explicitly into politics in this book, which is good. You don't want that. He does a little bit. There's a quote. He says, "I don't trust society to protect us. I have no intention of placing my fate in the hands of men whose only qualification is that they managed to con a block of people into voting for them." And so, stuff like that, I think, sprinkled throughout the book. It's just like good messages. It's like, I think the Fellowship of the Ring does this as well. You have to speak friend to enter the Mines of Moria, and Vito with Amerigo and all these guys at the beginning says, hey, you just have to call me your friend, and you can come under our protection. And this concept of friendship and protection, I think it comes up throughout history and through some of these types of novels as well. I really appreciate it. I love it. Like I said, I'm a sucker for a good theme, and Puzo hit on some good ones.
I think it's best we leave it there. Mr. Nikolas, how can people support your work? How can they find you? How can they get more of your musings?
Follow me on Twitter, like and retweet all my posts. And I'm still working on a fantasy epic novel that it's mostly all written, just need to do a lot of editing still. So look for that. Hopefully the next time I'm on Canon Fodder, I'll have something published that the listeners can support.
And as for the Double Dealer, you know how to support us. You can become a paid subscriber over on Substack. You can buy a magazine. You can just like and subscribe and share with your friends who might also like literature. I have a couple books out that you can take a look at on my Twitter page if you're so inclined. One of them, basically an Irish version of The Godfather, as we mentioned. I have no idea how to end podcasts, so I will just say insert ending here.